So I'm really excited that Bruce France is able to join us. I met him a few years ago when I reached out to the Capital District Council of Churches to collaborate on a project that I was involved in, and that was an interfaith project. I was bringing in a rabbi and a Palestinian from Israel and Palestine to talk about peacemaking efforts on the West Bank. And Bruce was very welcoming and supportive of that effort. And so Bruce is somebody who has become the executive director of the Council of Churches in this area. And I know an activist with the Braver Angels, which is why I reached out to him to say, what do you think about doing a story circle on this? And so I greatly appreciate your willingness to not only help us recruit tellers, but to tell your own story and start by telling us more, Bruce, about the Braver Angels.
First of all, thank you so much for that, Audrey. I've never seen myself as an activist, so I guess I'll have to reflect on that when I get off tonight. But I will start out by telling you about Braver Angels, and then I think we'll go to Chris, and then Elizabeth and Lorraine, just so you guys can be prepared, and then I'll finish up at the very end. Braver Angels actually started called Better Angels, and I'm sorry, I want to do this first. So I noticed in your storytelling that you often start with some kind of a prayer. And I'm going to do this reading from the Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address given on March 4th, 1861, this short excerpt from that. The mystic chords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. And that was where the name Better Angels came from. And it really was, the organization was started shortly after the 2016 election, when two of our founders, David Blankenhorn in New York City and David Lapp in rural Ohio, southwestern Ohio, I think it is, got talking on the phone and were very surprised. One was a blue in New York City and was kind of amazed at the kind of conversations that were going on. And the other was a red-leaning from Ohio who was happy that Trump had won, but again, couldn't understand the dialogue that was happening. And the two of them got together and said, is this really the way our society is going to become? And they started talking about, well, I know if we could get people from both sides together, that they would see so many issues differently and find places where they agree and just get to know each other better. They recruited Bill Doherty up in Minnesota. Bill is very well known as a family therapist who basically took the tools, active listening, sound speaking skills that he taught for all of his life as a family therapist for people who were not getting along and disagreeing on so many things. And Bill very quickly put together several different workshops. Put together two workshops. The first one was a red-blue. They tried it in Ohio. At some point here, I'll put in the chat when I get a chance, a link to a video called Finding Common Ground in Ohio. It's about the very first workshop that Braver Angels ever did. And they brought 6 or 7 reds and 6 or 7 blues together in a room for a whole weekend and took them through a variety of exercises. And you have to watch the videos on it, or if you ever get a chance, the documentary, the Braver Angels documentary. But what you really see happening is this group of people that they interview before and after go in with all of this animosity and quite frankly, anger, and come away from it friends. And it's highlighted by a evangelical Christian and a Muslim who are partnered up in these exercises and become so attached to each other that at the end of the workshop, they agree to go to the church, they agree to go to the mosque, so that they can see how each other religions are about. And that's really, quite frankly, I can't sum up Braver Angels much better than that. Since then, we've grown to 12 or 13,000 members. We have 50-some thousand people on our email list. We do a variety of workshops helping people with skills to learn to talk to each other with those who they disagree with. And quite frankly, there are skills that can be used in any situation where you disagree with people, not just political disagreements. We've created alliances. We have one here in the capital region. We put on many workshops in the region. We now do debates. We do podcasts, and there's so much more that I can tell you about it. But that's not really what the story is, although it's a good one. I am going to turn it over first to Chris and let her tell her story.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So I'm Chris Cook. I'm from just north of Seattle in Washington State, but I'm originally from New York. And so I hear the accents that I used to have from a few of you that I miss very much. And when I'm with my family for just 5 minutes, it all comes back. So I grew up in Westchester, went to school in upstate New York at one of the SUNYs at SUNY Potsdam, and then went to SUNY upstate. So I've been from New York, and I grew up Catholic in a neighborhood that was all of my neighbors were primarily Jewish, and I think that's a wonderful way to grow up because I learned very early on that I was just taken in and invited to a lot of the events at the temples, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. I was invited to Passover with my neighbors and all my friends, and I was always felt to be welcome. And that is something that I've carried with me all my life, to always make sure that everyone that I'm around feels welcome. And it's something that I learned very young. I also lived in Salt Lake City for quite a few years, and I'm not LDS, so I learned there also that when you're not fitting in exactly in a cultural or religious sense with those around you, that it's so important to feel welcome, to make others feel welcome. So it's something that I've always done. And Braver Angels is really so much about that, about having us feel welcome and feel comfortable enough to talk about things that we agree with, that we have in common, but also things that are different. And not to just avoid those differences, but talk about them and learn from them with each other. And let's see. So then I've lived here in Washington for quite a while, and I was on our city council for a little bit. And our city council it's a nonpartisan position. So that was a great opportunity for me to learn how to work with folks who have a very different political view than I do, and to find those areas of intersection where we can agree, but also those areas where we disagree, and stand your own ground and make sure that you understand how you feel and what's important to you, but at the same time try to work with others who might feel differently and find those areas where we intersect, and that's where the work gets done. In those areas. And when you're not committed to a particular political party, like in a nonpartisan position, it was really nice because I didn't feel pressure to kind of vote along party lines in one way or another. And it's really interesting that the issues then become just the issues. And, like they say, potholes have no parties. So, we all want the same thing really when it comes down to it. We all want a safe community, great place to raise our children, good education, functioning system, good public works. And, when you think of it that way, we all are coming from a very similar point of view. And it's just, a lot of times it's how we get to the same place that we want to get to. So when I was then introduced to Braver Angels, it was about 3 years ago from my friend Mary Beth, who was supposed to be here tonight, but couldn't make it. And I think it's kind of funny that Lorraine and I are both here. I'm thinking that it takes 2 people to fill in for Mary Beth instead, because she's such a force. So it takes 2 of us. But Braver Angels does something called a red-blue workshop. Maybe you have heard of it already, where you take probably equal numbers of people who lean blue and equal numbers of people who lean red and go through certain exercises together. And the first exercise is to take all of those folks who agree with you. So all of the blues go in one room, all of the reds go in one room, and talk about the stereotypes that the other side might have about you. So what would, if I'm a blue, what would red people say about me being a blue? That's a stereotype. And is there a kernel of truth to it? And it was such an interesting thing to do, just kind of think about, now, what would someone else who disagrees with me say about me? And is there a kernel of truth to that? Where does that come from? And we went through that exercise. I found it really eye-opening. And I would say that one of the main things that I came away with from that is that one of the stereotypes that I thought, okay, so I lean blue, and one of the stereotypes that might be said about me might be that I'm a bleeding heart liberal. And that would be said in a negative way. But when we sat and we talked about it and we thought about, where does that come from? How is that portrayed? It occurred to me, I grew up in I went to Catholic school, and the name of my school was Sacred Heart. And our insignia was a bleeding heart, and it was the bleeding heart of Jesus. So at that moment, I started really kind of looking back at the way I was raised and how I believe and what I believe and why I believe. And it was very, very eye-opening to me to say, actually, I think that's a goal. That's something that I would be very proud of. That's something unattainable that I would, devote my life to trying to be more like. And I don't consider it a stereotype. So it was eye-opening for me to be able to look at something like that. And we looked at other issues and other stereotypes, and just kind of came away with a greater understanding of really my own viewpoint, as well as the viewpoint of others. And I think that for me, that's really the key with Braver Angels, is to look and understand other people's viewpoints, but at the same time, when you do that, you learn about yourself and how you feel the way that you feel, and why the way you feel is so important to you. And I think generally the other thing that I get so much out of from Braver Angels is the idea that our country is we're stronger when we're united. And to me, it's one of the most patriotic things we can do, is to try to come together and understand each other. And of course, be kind to each other, but debate as well, and come away with a greater understanding of each other and of ourselves. And I think that's a really very patriotic thing to do. And I think that's probably my experience with Braver Angels. Thank you.
Okay. Bruce, do you want to introduce our next speaker?
Yep, our next one is Elizabeth Dahl, also from the Seattle area. All 3 of these wonderful women are. And she's going to tell you her story. And go right ahead, Elizabeth. She did put in the chat that her internet connection was unstable, which it looks like it is.
Yeah, I don't see her.
Nope.
Did she fall off? So she'll come back.
Yep.
So
Laura, well, why don't I go ahead with mine? And
Oh, Elizabeth says, I can hear you and I'm speaking. Hold on, I'm looking for you, Elizabeth, because you're muted. We, oh, I see you. Okay, and now you're not muted. Okay, Bruce, I think we have Elizabeth. Why don't you speak again?
You did. Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, my internet must have died just for a second. Sorry, guys. I am at an Airbnb in Texas for a Braver Angels retreat, and where the internet connection is strong, and it's strong, keeps just like disappearing and reappearing. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, so actually, if I can interrupt you, it might be, I wonder if it'd be better if you keep your video off.
I can.
So everybody take a look at Elizabeth and take in what she looks like. And then if you put your video off, we might have a better chance of hearing you consistently.
Okay. All right. So I live on Bainbridge Island, which is an island west of Seattle. And I became introduced to Braver Angels in 2018 after I was running actually a very similar event just on my own on Bainbridge Island. After the 2016 election, I had someone reach out to me kind of randomly and ask me if we could get together for coffee or breakfast or something, because she had missed something in the election and she didn't know what she had missed. And also she didn't know anyone that she could ask what she had missed, because she didn't know anyone who would admit to have voting differently, to have ever voted differently than she did in their lives. And we got breakfast together, and that went really well, leading me to introduce her to a couple of my friends. And then she introduced them to a couple of her friends. And we decided to organize a dinner where we asked each other questions and we broke bread together and we broke into pairs. We're very non-confrontational, very civil, very articulate, and just expressed why we thought the way that we did, and learned a lot about ourselves and each other. And when that went really well, we expanded. We held a second one, and instead of 6 women, this time it was 8 women. And one of the women from the second dinner reached out to me 7 months after the second dinner to invite me to a Braver Angel Red Bull workshop. And the workshop is one like Chris talked about, where we get together a group of people that have very different political opinions from each other. And we help them talk to each other through a variety of exercises. We help them ask the right questions. We help them communicate with each other in a calm and helpful way, so that at the end, we understand each other better and everyone has heard each other out. And also, usually we find common ground at the same time. And I love the Red Blue workshops so much that I was like, cool. Into the wheel. I don't have to keep my thing on Bainbridge. I'm myself in Braver Angels. I have participated in Braver Angels since. In 2020, I got laid off from the day job that I'd had COVID-19 and found myself a lot more time on my hands while I was managing campaigns, and decided to delve more deeply. At which point, I started participating more in the Washington Alliance. Now I have found the director of a new initiative with Braver Angels called Braver Politics, where we're organizing the same types of workshops with the goal of bringing elected officials into those workshops and helping them depolarize their political conversations and their political interactions, both with each other and their constituents. My day job is the Family Policy Washington, which is a socially conservative policy center. My boss is a former Democrat turned Republican. And so I have really interesting philosophical, theological, and policy conversations every single day. It's never the same. And we have a lot of interesting disagreements. We have places where we think similarly. And I think that Angels has provided me a lot of training, has benefited just my day-to-day interactions with my boss and with my coworkers in helping them communicate with each other and helping me with them, and then also helping me communicate our ideas to the people that we speak with and to government elected officials that we interact with in the course of lobbying and education. Did you have anything further you wanted me to talk about?
Only
Okay.
if there's a very personal story about an individual that you were able to create a bond with across differences. Otherwise,
Absolutely. So I have had a great wonderful interactions across the divide thanks to Braver Angels. I participated in a number of one-on-one conversations, and one that comes to mind is a conversation I had, or what turned into several conversations that I've had with a woman out of Ohio who is a Catholic. I am a Protestant Christian. And we started talking because of a Braver Angels one-on-one conversation. She is a Democrat, or a blue in Braver Angels terms. I'm a Republican. And we found that we had a lot more in common than we expected to. We expected to have them in common, but we think really similarly on a lot of subjects, and discovered that for the most part, what differed is actually the way our parties behave in our respective states rather than our actual opinions among each other. And so that was really, it was a really interesting perspective to gain. And we enjoyed our conversation much and related well to each other that we actually had a couple of more conversations after that and added each other on Facebook. And now we talk pretty regularly. She is still a Democrat, and sometimes she posts things that I don't agree with. We've actually, we had an interesting conversation about some of the post office stuff that happened in 2020. It's just, Braver Angels has been a wonderful experience, a wonderful series of experiences. It has given me the opportunity and the tools to have conversations with people that I disagree with, have conversations with people that I can find common ground with unexpectedly, and have conversations with people that help me better understand the differences and similarities that exist, not just around me, but also all over the United States, has been incredibly valuable. I was always aware that Seattle is a little bit of a geographical bubble and ideological bubble, but Braver Angels has definitely helped me recognize exactly how bubbled it is, and helped me gain a broader perspective, and given me the opportunity and perspective therein to communicate that to my candidates when I'm managing campaigns, and to help them also have a broader perspective and have healthier interactions on the campaign trail when they're talking to potential constituents, when they're doorbelling, when they're talking to, when they get elected and they're talking to their new constituents, and helping them to have constructive conversations, find the common ground even when they disagree. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Audrey, you're muted.
All right. So Lorraine, would you like to introduce yourself and tell your story?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Before I do that, I just wanted, we've talked a lot about Mary Beth Stibbons tonight, and she is down in Texas where Elizabeth is for the National Leaders Retreat. So, and that's one of the reasons, so they're both in Texas doing things at the national level. That's how good both of these women are. And Mary Beth was one of the people that helped get the Washington State Braver Angels group off the ground. I personally joined Braver Angels in 2017, soon after the 2016 election. I was in such a state, people. I just was so upset and angry. I could not believe what our nation had just done. I lean blue, and I used to march in the streets for women's rights. I mean, you talk about an activist, Bruce. I claim it. I just used to take my son with me on marches for equality. I was just appalled. And I didn't understand it. I mean, that was the big thing. I could not understand it. And because I was born and raised on the West Coast in California, the only other time I remember such a big split politically in our family was the Kennedy-Nixon. And my mom was for Kennedy and my dad was for Nixon. And I never liked Nixon, so I became a Democrat. I'm pretty sure that's why. And so that, I carried that. And my mother, I got all my sense of justice and right and wrong, and something needs to be done from my mother. So there I was, in this blue bubble, and I moved up to Seattle in the early 70s. And that's when all of the turmoil, across the country was going on, the anti-war demonstrations and all of that. So that's my background. But when I moved to Washington State, it was the first time that I met moderate Republicans. I didn't know that there was such a thing. I had never voted for Republicans in my life until I moved to Washington State. And there were some pretty moderate people. They were fiscally conservative, but on social issues, the things that I cared most about, they were really good. They believed in women's rights, and they believed in equality for people of color and all of the things that I really cared about. And so it was a really nice time in the Washington State. Our Republican governor was the one that welcomed the Vietnamese refugees when nobody else would. I mean, it was really a heyday of collaboration and working together. Those were the days. So when 2016 happened, I just felt like I'd lost my country. And but I read an article in the New York Times by David Brooks, and he talked about this new organization called Braver Angels. And so I reached out to the national group, and they put me in touch with a couple of people. Mary Beth was one of them, and Dee Endelman. And at that point, there weren't enough people to do workshops in this area. So I immediately started, my background is in communications. I used to work in television. So I consider myself a recovering television producer. And I started a company where I was teaching people about communications and how to talk to reporters. So I had background in communications training. And when I read about Braver Angels, I thought I could help this organization. But they needed moderators. They needed people, particularly in the Puget Sound region, to kind of do these workshops. So I became a moderator before I actually attended any events, because we didn't have the people to do it. So it was like a group of 5 or 6 of us meeting for coffee, once every month. And somebody said, well, Lorraine could do a newsletter. She's in communications. So I started the Braver Angels newsletter, which now goes out to all of Washington State, and we send it out every other month. And so it just began like that. And I started teaching people the curriculum for how to talk to one another, and how to listen to one another first, and then how to talk to one another. And the first time I went to a workshop as a participant was the Red Blue workshop, which you've all heard about today from from Bruce and Chris and Elizabeth. And I would tell you, if you haven't already, that is really a transformative experience. I remember going in, because I don't have a lot of Reds in my life. I have a family member who, I don't know if this person identifies with a party, but his already I've identified, I have to be careful here. His politics are internet politics, and it's just making me nuts. So, the big transition and transformation for me is being able to sit in a room with him and just listen and not get apoplectic or want to just throttle him. It's like, okay, and even maybe be curious once in a while. Like, I'm curious, what was it that brought you to that perspective? Or I'm curious about your experience. What is it that, asking questions for understanding and curiosity rather than why the hell are you thinking that way? Are you nuts or what? And so for me, it was a way to calm that anger. But I digressed a little bit there. The Red Blue workshop was an opportunity for me to see the people on the other side are not two-headed monsters. They're not people who are evil, and they're not my enemy. They're people who really care about this country as much as I do. And at the end of the day, after listening and observing and checking my own biases and my own polarizing behavior and thoughts, it was the big question I had at the end of the day is, who benefits by us being at each other's throats? Most of us are in the middle. And having worked in the media, I am sorry to say, and we probably all understand this, it's the people who make the most noise at the extremes of both sides, of every side, that gets the most attention. But the vast majority of us are in the middle. And if we can start understanding and leveraging our power to change, it's going to happen from the ground up, people. And Elizabeth mentioned the new initiative, which is getting people in legislatures, and in Congress to come together to do the Red Blue workshop. If they just do that and come away with it with understanding we are not enemies. If we care about this country, we have to do something. We have to stand up and say, we can work together. I mean, I look around and I can see that most of us remember a day. Most of us have lived long enough to know there was a day when Reds and Blues talked to one another. I also want to say something about the whole Red-Blue thing, since I'm a moderator and that question comes up a lot, because we're talking about bridging the divide, but we kind of break people up into Reds and Blues. It's because it's a shorthand. It's just a shorthand to say, we know that there's a divide, and here's generally where that divide is. But we understand that people are not Reds and Blues only of all time. Sometimes we're mostly purple. It's just that on some things we lean more conservative or more liberal than on others. And so, but Reds and Blues, that's how we can identify to say, okay, where do you land and how do you see people who don't agree with you? And so it's just a shorthand. So just to answer that question. But again, I really want to know, and that's kind of what I spend my time thinking about, is who's really benefiting by all this conflict and all of this anger. And again, personally for me, I feel most of the time I'm less angry. I can't say I'm perfect at it, but I work at it and I try not to jump the gun. When I hear somebody that says something that I believe is just either off the wall crazy, I kind of step back and count to 10 and think of a braver angel's way to respond to that. And you've all heard this old cliche, we teach what we need to learn. So I think I stay in touch. I stay connected to Braver Angels because it's an ongoing learning for me. It's something that I need to continue to learn over and over again. I'm looking to see here if there's anything else that the questions that Bruce sent us. I think I covered just about everything, Bruce, but I'm happy to answer questions as they come up. I thank you for this opportunity. And yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm last, or at least for this part of it anyway. And I'm going to start my story is that I think what Braver Angels offers has just always been in my nature. And I was, when we're bringing up, my wife and I, young kids, I got the book Parent Effectiveness Training. I don't know who remembers that, but raise your hand if you do. But Parent Effectiveness Training, and that's when I first got this sense of there is a different way to relate to people. And then later on, I was very taken, and still am, with Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And really, if you think of it, habits 4, 5, and 6, think, win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergy is, I'm going to tell you, if we just do that in our world, we'll be better off. Think, win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergy. But my dealing with political conversations goes all the way back to my college days. And I went to college, graduated college in the mid-70s. And I had a roommate for 2 or 3 years that was, well, ideologically, we were on different ends of the spectrum. And I can remember, you'd have a few beers and we'd, get into conversations, and they'd be almost knockdown, drag out fights. But never for 1 minute did we ever think that we wouldn't wake up the next morning and be absolutely great friends with each other. And, I always think back to that, and boy, have we gone away from that. And I had a person, I worked for a company, and the owner and I would have political conversations, and we would come at topics from different angles. We were different ideologically, we were different. And but we would almost always agree on what the basic problem was. We just more often than not disagreed on the solution to it. But there was no doubt we agreed with. So one of those things when you have these conversations with people and you say to each other, well, if we just ran the world, right? I'm sure everybody's had those conversations. I have them all the time. But those two, I always knew that you could do that. And after the 2016 election, I sat and thought, this is craziness. And I had to kind of have a son who's in Las Vegas, and we had a lot of conversations around this. And I kept saying, I know if we bring people together and get them to talk the right way, they would be able to realize that, they don't need to be screaming at each other. And he actually went so far as to put on his Facebook post, look, I'm happy to meet anybody at wherever it was, the casino or whatever, and have these talks. He didn't have any, nobody took him up on it. But about that time, I was driving a bus. I'd retired. I was driving a bus as a sub for Guilderland Schools. Great job. I loved it. And would spend my lunch hour in the Guilderland Library. And one day I see this flyers, and one's for the skills workshop and then this red blue workshop. And it was just, it was exactly what I had always thought. So that's really how I came to be it. I was hooked from day one. And even as much as I knew, I was still surprised at the impact that the red blue workshop had on me. It was even better than I could have ever imagined it would be. So I helped to start the Alliance here locally. I've been a moderator. I've moderated since we've got on Zoom. I've had the occasion to moderate all over the country. It's a wonderful, I love doing it. Lorraine, I don't think you and I have ever worked together, but we might have. I never keep track. But I want to tell you two important stories to me. The first one is going to be about my brother. And my brother is very far to the right and has a lot of views that are different than me. And I'm a moderate, I'm in the middle. What I tell people is I'm a registered Democrat. I'm probably closer to an old style Republican. I believe in small government. If I had to pick a political party, it would be libertarian. And when I lived in Massachusetts and could vote, I was registered as an independent because then you could vote in either primary. I love that. And what I mostly hold on to is that I don't have a tribe. I take every single political issue and I look at it, and based upon its merits, I make. So I'm quite frankly all over the place. And my brother is very far to the right. And you can imagine, not only the difficulty of having these conversations, but, you got siblings involved. So we've got, 55 years or 60 years of being brothers. And it was very challenging. But after I had taken the skills course and learned the skills, and I would have the conversations with him, I really began to learn, and it was hard. It was not easy to not get frustrated with him. But that if I could just, really listen to what he had to say and ask him genuine questions. We call them genuine questions of curiosity. That means they're not gotcha questions. They're not trying to trick anybody. We really want to know. And that if I would be persistent with that, he would slowly but surely begin doing stuff like, well, what do you think? And really, the first time I ever heard that, it was so powerful to me that just using the skills, I could do that. And the other story is less about braver angels, but I think it's very germane to what we're talking about. In that I had another relative who came to me again is a conservative on the right, and said to me very recently, he says, I'm getting so tired of the left. Says they call me racist, they call me this, they call me that, they make all these names, they say how hateful I am, and I'm just tired of it. And I looked at that person and I said to him, now I've given the gender, so I'm starting to slowly but surely give it away. But I said to him, when was the last time, tell me the last time somebody said that to you? And he thought for a while. He says, I don't know. And I said to him, that's what the media and the politicians are doing to you. And I believe that. I think that there is money to be earned. There's elections to be won by dividing us, and we get into these what we believe that they're just not accurate. And I thought that was a great example of that. So I always have more to talk about, but I'm going to stop there. And Audrey, where would you like to go from here? Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.